attorney is trying to find her, and her attorney has said that she may not be willing to come and testify anyway. So we'll
be
see.
interesting.
What his team is trying to do is get the public to assume that the government is leaking some of this negative information about him, like that Cassie video. But the reality is he's got a lot of enemies.
The air inside the courtroom was electric, humming with a tension that only the most salacious trials could generate. Every seat was filled, with reporters jostling for prime spots to catch every gasp, every flinch, and every ounce of drama. The trial of Sean Diddy Combs wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was a spectacle. A theater of public reckoning for a man who had once stood as the epitome of success, charm, and cultural dominance. But today, the empire he meticulously built over decades teetered on the edge of ruin. And the betrayal came not from a scorned business associate or a spurned lover, but from within his own family.
I want to mention one other quick thing. They can't find witness number 3 still. This is apparently an ex-girlfriend of Diddy's who was one of the alleged victims.
And
prosecution can't find her.
Right, I heard.
The charges against Diddy were already explosive, enough to make even the most hardened tabloid veteran raise an eyebrow. Allegations of coercion, racketeering, and secretive gatherings that blurred the lines between entertainment and exploitation painted a grim picture of a man whose charm had long masked darker inclinations. But the courtroom wasn't just packed because of the gravity of the charges. It was the unexpected twist of family betrayal that had turned this case into headline gold. Somewhere in this room, seated among the cluster of lawyers, assistants, and spectators, was Christian Combs, Diddy's own son, whose testimony had been teased as a bombshell that could redefine the entire narrative. From the moment the trial began, Diddy had maintained an almost eerie calm. Dressed in a sleek suit that seemed to mock the gravity of the situation, he sat at the defense table, flanked by a team of high-powered attorneys who radiated confidence. He nodded occasionally, whispering to his lead counsel, flashing the occasional tight-lipped smile. It was the kind of performance you'd expect from a man who had spent his life in the public eye, who had weathered scandal after scandal and always come out on top. But even the most seasoned performers can't hide forever when the stakes are this high. The prosecution wasted no time setting the stage, painting a picture of a man who had used his wealth and influence to orchestrate a shadowy world of secrecy and control. They spoke of private jets, high-profile parties, and whispered exchanges that hinted at more than what met the eye. It was compelling, sure, but it was also the kind of narrative that could be dismissed as hearsay. A story built on the shaky foundation of second-hand accounts and circumstantial evidence. That is, until the judge gave a quiet nod and the prosecution unveiled their ace, an audio recording.
In her civil lawsuit, Cassie said that she was the victim of abuse, assault, and at the hands of Diddy.
The announcement alone was enough to make the room fall silent. You could almost feel the collective intake of breath as the prosecutor calmly stated whose voice would be heard. This recording, he said, his tone measured but heavy with implication, features the voice of Christian Combs. The words hung in the air, almost surreal in their weight. Heads turned, necks craned, and all eyes darted between Diddy and the prosecution table. For a moment, Diddy's composure faltered. His jaw tightened, and his hands gripped the edge of the table with a force that turned his knuckles white. Whatever he had been expecting, this wasn't it. The audio began to play, and what followed was nothing short of devastating. Christian's voice came through, steady but unmistakably somber. He described events with a level of detail that only someone intimately familiar with Diddy's world could provide. He spoke of lavish parties where confidentiality wasn't just expected, it was enforced. With payouts and non-disclosure agreements, he mentioned flights booked for unnamed guests, conversations behind closed doors, and arrangements that seemed designed to keep certain truths buried. There was no hesitation in his tone, no sense of embellishment, just cold, clinical facts that painted a damning picture of a man who had long operated above the rules.
The defense wanted to propose a question on, after the potential jurors filled out their questionnaire, have they seen any news media, any documentaries, anything just relating to a news medium, and whether or not they saw it in between them filling out the questionnaire to Monday morning when they saw, or when they go to jury selection.
For Diddy was like watching the walls close in. His face, usually a mask of confidence, began to crumble. At first, he seemed to retreat inward, his eyes fixed on some invisible point on the table in front of him. But as the recording continued, his emotions boiled over. His lips moved as if he were silently mouthing denials, and his hands, once so steady, began to tremble. The courtroom, meanwhile, was transfixed. Even the most seasoned journalists, those who had covered every scandal from Hollywood to Wall Street, seemed momentarily stunned into silence. This wasn't just testimony. This was betrayal in its rawest, most unfiltered form. And then, the breaking point. As Christian's voice described, payments made to keep people quiet. Diddy snapped. He shot to his feet, his chair screeching against the floor, and pointed a trembling finger toward the speakers where the audio played. "This is a setup," he bellowed, his voice cracking with a mix of rage and desperation. "He's my son, this is lies." The room erupted into chaos. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment, their fingers flying across keyboards, while the judge pounded his gavel in a futile attempt to restore order. Diddy's lawyers rushed to his side, tugging at his arms, whispering urgent pleas for him to sit down, to stop talking, but it was too late. The outburst was already etched into the collective memory of everyone present.
Which, again, the judge kind of made this a point, too, talking about, okay, well, if we're going to continue to do sidebars each and every single time that a prospective juror has to talk about a sensitive topic, that could take up a lot of time. But again, the defense and the government both seem pretty confident that they'll still be able to kind of get it going in a quick pace. This isn't unusual to do in these types of high-profile cases. So that was pretty much just the topics about,
U.S. Marshals moved quickly, surrounding Diddy and guiding him out of the courtroom as he continued to shout over his shoulder. "You don't understand! He's been manipulated!" he yelled, his voice growing fainter as the heavy doors closed behind him. The room slowly settled, but the sense of shock lingered like a heavy fog. The prosecution, unfazed, simply paused the audio and waited for the judge's instruction to continue. They knew they had already won this round. The image of Diddy losing control, of a father betrayed by his own blood, was more powerful than any piece of evidence they could present. Outside the courtroom, the fallout was immediate. Social media exploded with hashtags like Diddy Breakdown and Christian Speaks trending within minutes. Fans and critics alike took to their platforms, dissecting every second of the outburst and debating its implications. Some rushed to Diddy's defense, calling Christian a traitor who had sold out his own father for personal gain. Others praised Christian for his courage, framing him as a whistleblower who had finally decided to do the right thing. But regardless of where people stood, one thing was clear. This trial had transcended the boundaries of a legal proceeding. It had become a cultural moment, a spectacle that exposed the fragility of even the most powerful empires.
This investigation is ongoing, and I encourage anyone with information about this case to come forward and to do it quickly.
Back in the courtroom, the prosecution resumed playing the recording, but the energy in the room had shifted. Diddy's absence was palpable, and his outburst lingered in the minds of everyone present, coloring their perception of the testimony. The audio continued, revealing more details that hinted at a world carefully constructed to shield secrets from the prying eyes of the public. Payments made in cash, conversations conducted in hushed tones, and a network of enablers who seemed complicit in maintaining the facade. It was all there, laid bare for the world to see. For Christian, the weight of his testimony was evident. He sat quietly, his face a mix of resolve and anguish. Whatever had driven him to take this step, whether it was guilt, fear, or some deeper sense of justice, it had come at a cost. The relationship between father and son, once a cornerstone of Diddy's carefully curated public image, was now irreparably fractured. And as the trial continued, it became increasingly clear that this was just the beginning. The recording was a crack in the dam, a glimpse into a much larger story that was only starting to unfold.
Or not really the judge, the government didn't go into too many details about the extent of the plea offer, but one thing that they had said was pretty much that under the plea offer, he would be facing less time than he's facing if he would have gone to trial. So when the allocution portion came, Diddy stood up, the judge kind of read him everything that he had needed to read to him, just about whether or not he was of sound mind, whether or not...
And just like that, the courtroom transformed into something more than a stage for legal theatrics. It became a battlefield, not just for Diddy's life, but for the entire machinery that had enabled him for decades. The recording wasn't just evidence. It was a key unlocking a Pandora's box of secrets that had festered in the shadows of his empire. But here's the thing. This trial wasn't just about Diddy. It wasn't even just about Christian. It was about the industry itself, the unspoken rules, the hushed alliances, and the lengths to which power protects its own. And as the audio played on, you could sense that what had been whispered for years was now being dragged into the glaring light. Because let's be honest, an empire like Diddy's doesn't crumble in a vacuum. This wasn't just one man gone rogue. This was a system, a finely tuned network of enablers, beneficiaries, and loyalists who all had something to gain from keeping the wheels turning. For years, Diddy had been an untouchable figure, A visionary, a mogul, a cultural kingpin who moved seamlessly between boardrooms and red carpets, who could charm the cameras while keeping the skeletons locked away. But the cracks were always there if you look closely enough. What we're seeing now is just the implosion that comes when the weight of secrecy becomes too much to bear.
Those individuals allegedly included high-ranking supervisors in the business, personal assistants, security staff, and household staff.
Behind the scenes, the whispers about Diddy were nothing new. Industry insiders had been talking for years, but no one dared to speak publicly. Why would they? The stakes were too high, careers were built on his approval, deals were brokered because of his influence, and when you're at the top, people don't just protect you, they insulate you. Lawyers, managers, publicists, even fellow artists, they all played their part in keeping the narrative clean. Everything from carefully managed payouts to airtight agreements was meticulously orchestrated to ensure that the public only saw what they were meant to see. It wasn't just damage control, it was an art form. But here's where it gets darker. The recording from Christian was just the tip of the iceberg. Behind closed doors, the prosecution had been building its case for years, and what they uncovered wasn't just a series of isolated incidents. It was a pattern. The same names kept coming up, the same strategies for keeping people quiet, the same methods for maintaining control. And yet, the more they dug, the more they realized that this wasn't something Diddy could have pulled off alone. This was systemic, it was layered, it was deliberate.
That they will be adding 2 defense attorneys. We only thought initially it was 1, but one thing that stood out to me when Mark Agnifilo was talking about this was he said that these defense attorneys are in the courtroom right now. I didn't see Mark Garagos in that courtroom, but what I did see is 2 defense attorneys that have been there when Brian Steele came on board, and those 2 defense attorneys were Nicole Westmoreland.
But even as investigators pieced together the puzzle, they started hitting walls. Walls that seemed suspiciously well built. Financial records vanished into a labyrinth of offshore accounts, shell companies, and shadowy transactions that led to nowhere. There were whispers of accountants and business managers who had mysteriously disappeared from the public eye, taking their secrets with them. Some sources even hinted at private meetings between Diddy's legal team and high-powered figures in finance, suggesting that the cover-up wasn't just about protecting one man, it was about safeguarding a network that stretched far beyond the entertainment world. And then there were the security teams, hired muscle that didn't just guard Diddy's mansions, but acted as enforcers, ensuring that anyone who got too close to the truth stayed quiet. Former employees have come forward, anonymously for now, describing a culture of fear and intimidation. One claimed that even staff members were forced to, signed agreements so binding they might as well have been shackles. Another spoke of surveillance systems that monitored not just the property but the people inside it, with recordings stored in vaults that only Diddy himself could access. It's the kind of paranoia that doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from knowing exactly how much you have to lose.
Not do this alone. Do you foresee that there could be other charges related to this case?
I'm not taking anything off the table.
No one wants to be mentioned.
Think about it. How does a man like Diddy, with the kind of visibility that comes with being an international icon, manage to keep so much hidden for so long? The answer lies in the people around him. Take the lawyers, for example. These weren't just any lawyers. These were the best in the business. The kind of legal minds who could turn a hurricane into a light breeze with the stroke of a pen. Non-disclosure agreements became their weapon of choice, binding anyone and everyone who came too close to the truth. And when that wasn't enough, there were settlements. Generous, quiet, and always layered with the implicit warning, cross this line and you'll regret it. And let's not forget the industry executives. These were the gatekeepers, the ones who could make or break an artist's career with a single phone call. They weren't just complicit, they were invested. Diddy wasn't just a client, he was a brand, a multi-stream cash cow whose success meant millions for everyone in his orbit. Turning a blind eye wasn't just easy, it was profitable. As long as the money kept flowing, as long as the hits kept coming, no one was asking any questions they didn't already know the answers to.
Hey, real quickly, all that commissary stuff, he's not getting any of that because people in the shoe have an abbreviated list. So he's out of luck. No stake for him. Yeah, he is on watch. This guy thought he would have went home. All of a sudden, he didn't get bond. Remember, the first night that he was there.
But the most chilling part? The social circle. The celebrities, the influencers, the so-called friends, who were always at the parties, always in the photos, always smiling for the cameras. How many of them knew? How many of them saw enough to know that something wasn't right and chose to look the other way? Silence in this world isn't just complicity, it's currency. Every kept secret, every unspoken word, every knowing glance was another deposit into the bank of power that Diddy had been building for decades. And yet, for all the layers of protection, for all the people who had something to lose, it only took one crack to bring the whole thing tumbling down. Christian's testimony wasn't just a betrayal, it was a revolt. It was the moment when someone who had everything to gain by staying quiet decided that the cost of silence was too high. But what drove him to that point? Was it guilt, fear, or was it something even deeper, like the realization that the very empire he had grown up admiring was built on foundations that were anything but honorable?
It's a question of that, but when you read through the indictment, it's pretty clear who could be indicted as a co-conspirator. Right now, there are people in the indictment who would be considered unnamed co-conspirators, but clearly have played a role in this conspiracy. And I think prosecutors have some big leverage on them because they're hoping that they testify against Diddy as prosecution witnesses.
As the trial continues, the fallout is becoming impossible to contain. Major brands are already distancing themselves, pulling sponsorships and quietly severing ties. Former collaborators are suddenly nowhere to be found, their once loyal support evaporating as quickly as a social media post can be deleted. And the legal team? They're scrambling, trying to reframe the narrative, spinning Diddy not as a predator but as a victim of a smear campaign, a scapegoat for an industry that has always thrived on exploitation. But the public isn't buying it, not this time, because for years, people have suspected that the entertainment industry had a dark side, that the glitter and glamour were just a mask for something far more sinister. And now, with every new piece of evidence, every shocking revelation, those suspicions are being confirmed in real time. This isn't just about one man. It's about an entire system that enabled him, that profited from him.
This is very significant, just from who we associate Diddy being and everything we've seen him do over the decades. Like you said, this is quite the downfall to go from, I mean, we saw the mansions back in March that were raided by the feds. So to go from living in those mansions to being in a jail cell right now, I think it really underscores the magnitude of what he's facing and the weight of the federal government.
And yet, for all the chaos, for all the damage, there's still a sense that we're only scratching the surface. If Diddy falls, who falls with him? How many more recordings are out there? How many more people are ready to come forward now that the floodgates have opened? And what happens when the industry has to reckon with the fact that this isn't just about one empire? It's about the culture that allowed it to thrive. So what do you think? Is this the end of Diddy's reign, or just the beginning of an even bigger scandal? How deep does this rabbit hole go, and who else might be implicated before it's all over? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and trust us, you're going to want to stick around for what's coming next. This story isn't just breaking, it's shattering. See you in the next one.